interesting question that's come up.
Okay.
It's very, mashallah. It is an interesting question. Maybe we can get you to start it, inshallah. Okay, the question reads, and before I ask it, it's not what you're expecting. It certainly wasn't a question that I was expecting, but it's a nice question. It's an interesting question. You've mentioned about turning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to change things, and the du'as, the tahajjud, the qiyam al-layl, and then other aspects taking the means. Should Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then place you in a position, okay, He places you in a position in which you have, let's say, 5 or so minutes, and you have the ears of an individual in authority who can affect change. All right, what would you say? After obviously now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you've done all the metaphysical, which is the asas, which is the major thing.
Mm-hmm.
And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed you in an opportunity in which you have 5 minutes to say to someone who has who Allah has placed in a position of authority to affect authority. What would you say?
That's not an easy question.
Yeah, good question, all right?
It's not about good or bad. The thing is that it depends on who you're talking to, who that person is, and what type of influence that they have. You see,
they can affect change.
Right, because there's no template for that, right? It just kind of depends on who that person is. Let's say, because rappers are people of influence, right? So if I'm talking to a rapper, my thing is, brother, I need you to start talking about more positive things. No more bitches and hoes. No more, talking about drug dealing and all this kind of stuff. Let's talk about some positive things in terms of development. So that's for that person, that's that conversation. If it's somebody that is a politician, then I need you to start, getting policies made that are going to require police to do certain things.
Let's focus on the policymakers, because I think that's the intended question. Is that
right? Well, we're talking about policymakers. The one thing that I would have to let them understand is that we need them to start being honest, like I've been talking about this whole time, is being truthful and honest, and that policies have to be made that are going to regulate our authority. Because if the authority is there to regulate the common person in terms of how in their conduct, then who regulates the regulators? You see what I'm saying? So there has to be, that's why in America we have the legislative branch, executive branch, and the judicial branch, because they're all supposed to be checks and balances for each other and keeping everybody in order, right? That's in theory what it's supposed to be about. So if that's the case, then we need the same type of thing. We need a checks and balance system. I think it was Killer Mike who said that we need to bring back the community review boards, where we used to have a system where the community as a whole would come together and talk to the chief of police about what they feel is happening with the police department. How well are you doing? In other words, the community is giving you a grade. We're letting you know how well you're doing something or you're not doing something. And we need some changes, right? And the politicians, or normally at that time period anyways, when those things were instituted, were on the side of the community, not the side of the police department. And so changes need to be made, And sometimes those kind of things will go up to internal affairs, IA. No police officer likes internal affairs, because internal affairs means that police officer is being investigated by another government source. So now when you've got the IA, internal affairs group, involved, right? in those community meetings, well, now there's a check and balance system. And so what we're saying, and what I'm saying is that we need to, if I'm talking to a politician, then I'd say, look, we need to bring stuff like that back because it restores community faith. It restores a balance with the power, and that's what's necessary. So I think that if I were talking to them, if I'm talking to a politician, that's one of the first things I talk about. Second thing is that we need to try and get policies made that are going to be labeled, because I think that crimes like this should be also labeled hate crimes, right? And they should be, I mean, because I mean, like it's hard to kind of defend one sense if a guy was stealing and then he got shot. Okay, can't defend that. Or a guy was shooting back at the cops, can't defend that. But when you got your knee on the neck of a man and he's telling you I can't breathe, and you keep your knee on there anyways, or like I've seen in some other videos, the guy's already on the ground being handcuffed and you run up and you start kicking him in the side of his head and these kind of things. Or a person's already been subdued and you come up there and punch him in his face, you know, when he's got his hands behind his back, that's a coward. That's a punk move. That's what a coward does, right? And so these cowards need to be brought up on charges, and they need to be brought up on hate crime charges. And so, because you got to make this thing a little bit more severe. So when you do that, then it becomes problematic. And I think that they also need to understand that as a community, if you're going to continue to do this, Mr. Politician, then what we're going to do is not only are we going to not vote for you next term, then we're also going to start suing the insurance the insurance companies and the companies that run the pension plans for our police departments, because we're going to start hitting you where your money is. And that's going to cause you problems. So that would be what I would say and what I would do.
Sayyidi Hasan, if you're still there, inshallah, the same question, which is basically, you have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed you in a position whereby you have the ears of somebody who can affect change. And let's say that, for example, that is a policy maker or policy makers, and you have 5 minutes to say something to them that can affect change in the situation we're talking about. What would you say?
I mean, there's two aspects, at least I can see two aspects to that question. One, are we going to sit in front of that person and literally discuss policies to change the situation that's on the ground? And if that's the case, then definitely we got to talk about offices being occupied by our people that have our best interests in mind. Are we talking about I'm trying to appeal to his better nature so that he can see me as a human being, right? I think those can take place in that situation. In respect to that, there's certain things that we should be trying to rally and lobby to, put ourselves in those positions of where we have control over the institutes that govern our lives, from education, to law, right? I mean, the fact that I think that's one of the biggest problems that we see. You're dealing with the people who don't see you as human. That's why they don't feel anything. I had a close friend of mine who, when the police wrongfully detained him, argument ensued. Because I mean, who wants to wrongfully? They feel like if you don't listen to what they say, that hence means they have the right to physically harm you, if not take your life. And so, not recognizing this person has a right not to unwarrantedly be stopped and detained and or possibly arrested. And so, in him not wanting to be arrested, an argument ensued, and the guy literally just the police officer started bashing his head with his baton. He knocked my good Muslim brother to the ground and started with his baton, was hitting him in his head. And the thing that made me so angry about it is I know that and then he lost hearing in his ear. He has a lawsuit against the police department going. But you know, I know that he had no regard for his life. He had no regard for his well-being. And I was just thinking about how much I love this brother and how much he means to me. And I know that he wasn't seen like that in the eyes of this individual. Hence the law, you know, the officer. So, you know, I think a lot of times, you know, when one of the situations I was in North Dakota, I was talking to, you know, that was one of the instances that I was in a situation where I was around white folks who had never been around minorities before. You know, I've been around, I mean, I'm from the Bay Area, right? I didn't realize how diverse the Bay Area is until you go out into other aspects of America, and then you'll see it's actually, you know, large portions of America is very much so segregated, right? So, and this guy, you know, he was saying to me how, you know, like, don't you got a problem? This is back when Obama, you know, Obama was in office. And he said, don't you got a problem, Obama, letting these kids in the border and this and that? And they were, you know, you had all these people, you know, protesting, these white patriotic Americans protesting. And then, you know, they were stopping the buses that they were bringing kids over. And these were kids who had lost their parents and grandparents to cartel violence, right? And then I said, he was like, don't you have a problem with that? And I said, do I have a problem with young kids who lost their parents? They're busing like 6 months old, 2-year-old children on a bus with strangers. They don't know anybody or the other kids with them. I said, do you know how scared? I said, I like to think if something happened to me, that people would be decent enough to, you know, to care and tend to my children. And when look, I said, the problem with that is, you know, is that we don't see each other in the same way. You know, we don't see each other. You don't realize that I want a good quality of life for me and my family, just like you do. That's why people, they can look at these pictures and see Ethiopians starving and eat a cheeseburger and heart being unaffected. Because when they look at certain people, they feel like that's their place in society. That's where they're supposed to be. That's how they live, right? And so that's why you have people who are in positions of power or influence or that can bring about change, and you don't see this urgency to try to complement those needs that are there. You know, so I think one of the biggest ways is to, you know, see each other, be able to have the ability to empathize with one another. And on a, you know, on a legal level, I would leave our legal experts, you know, who I would know have our best interests in mind to have that conversation.
Sheikh Jamal, we'll have one more question to be answered from yourself. Inshallah. What's your views on white privilege?
What kind of question is that? I mean, what's my view? White privilege is white privilege. I mean, you know, it's what they have. You know,
there are people who disagree that even exists.
Nah, only a white person would say that. But I mean, by the fact that he can say that proves the point. You know what I mean? There was a movie. It was called Soul Man, right? It was about this white guy who was trying to go to Harvard but didn't get accepted. But he really wanted to go to Harvard. So what he did was he applied to Harvard as a Black American, and he took some tablets that made his skin darken up, and he put a wig on. So basically, he was at the school as a Black kid. And all these things he was doing, he lived every stereotype out that he thought Black people were. Like they invited him to a Black Student Association meeting. He came with a leather jacket and a beret on, thinking, you know, he had to be militant. He thought it was a Black militant gathering. He came in there and those guys had on turtlenecks and blazers and cardigan sweaters and nice dresses and nice slacks, you know, and they were like, what are you doing here? What are you doing? You know, he was all embarrassed because his perception of what Black life was and what Black life is one thing. Then he wound up getting his he wound up getting stopped by police. He got beat up by police. He got thrown in jail. While he was in jail, a bunch of drunk white guys went in there who had just come from an American football game. Their team lost. They beat him up and everything else. Gets out of jail. He has to go through all these different things that a lot of black people have to deal with. Towards the end of the movie, he had to come clean and show that he was white. He was talking to a black professor, and the black professor said, "So, now you know what it is to be black." And he looked at the professor and said, "No, I don't. Because at any given time, I could always go back to being white." You understand? So I have that ability to always, I can come over there and try and be down with you, but I can always step away. Mm-hmm. I can always do different things. I can go places and expect, like I can go into a third world country and I expect you to treat me a certain way. Not just because I'm an American, because I'm a white American. When I go places, I don't, like you've seen yourself, Zane, in terrain. You've seen like white people come walking in, they're just backpacking, just kind of wandering around, looking, just traveling, right? And they come in, the women come in wearing tank tops and these things. And then, when they start seeing everybody looking at them funny, they start trying to cover up. But the fact that you don't even respect the country, the custom, that's white privilege, because you feel like you don't have to. You come into a country where showing the bottom of your feet is really rape, right? Showing the bottom of your feet is really poor man. I mean, it's just so insulting, right? And it's not just Arabs and other Muslims who have that. Even Koreans and like Vietnamese people and these people, they have the same type of feeling about that, right? So you come into a country knowing this, and you just throw your feet up on a table at a restaurant because you think you can, and you feel like it's okay. That's white privilege. Just the fact that you think you can just do what you want to do and not be called to account, that's white privilege. The fact that you can go places that a lot of us can't, that's white privilege. So to say that doesn't exist, I think is it's arrogant to even say that you don't have it. And that you don't, or like for instance, we had a white lady just recently in Central Park. You're supposed to have your dog on a leash. Her dog was off the leash. Mm-hmm. There was a black man who was bird watching. He told her, "You need to put your dog on the leash." She got upset. He had his phone out and started recording her. And she was like, "Get that camera out of my face. Get that camera out of my face. Stop recording me." He says, "No, I'm not going to stop recording you." And then she was like, "I'm calling the police. I want to call the police and have you arrested." He said, "Please, call the police, please, because you're the one that's in violation." So she puts the leash on the dog. She gets on the phone and she's like, "Oh, help, send the police. I'm the African-American man. He's threatening me and my dog. Oh, please help." She started getting all extra, and these things, because why? She knew what that meant. Because if the police came, they would probably have killed that man. They would have beat him up. They would have done something. She was looking to get this man killed. Right? And then afterwards, she wound up losing her job. When it got on the news and it was all over social media, she wound up losing her job, and her dog was what they call a rescue dog, right? So it came from like a shelter. The people from the shelter came and took her dog because while she was on the phone, she was choking the dog out with the leash, right? So they wound up taking her dog. And then she wrote an apology saying, "I realize as a white person, I am more protected than everybody else. I'm more privileged because I'm more protected because I know that the police are going to look out for my best interest as opposed to a person of color." Right? So there it is. It exists. It exists.
Again, But just for yourself, someone's asked a question about Black Lives Matter. What should I say to people that say all lives matter in response to members of the Black Lives Matter movement? And would you recommend people joining the Black Lives Matter movement?
What was the first part of that question again?
I think it ties into the white privilege, to be honest. But what should I say to people that say all lives matter in responses to members who are from the Black Lives Matter movement?
All right. First off, saying we already understand all lives matter. No one's saying that all lives don't matter, but all lives are not being taken by police left and right. Right. Again, it goes back to what I was saying before. That's like saying, people saying, well, you guys, you Black people need to just pull yourselves together and just pull yourself up by the bootstraps and stop complaining and all this kind of stuff. So those same assholes who say stuff like that are very insensitive and very ignorant because they don't understand, they don't get it. They don't get the plight that we're going through and our history. We're not coming from the same playing field. When we walked into this game, it was already skewed against us. The game was already stacked against us. Whereas others may have had the opportunity, a fair shake. You got a fair chance to come here and do different things. I mean, let me put it to you like this. There's here in Atlanta, you have the city of Atlanta, but then you have the metro area. And our metro areas are broken down to different counties. One particular county is called Gwinnett County. Now, Gwinnett County, out of all the counties, has one of the highest levels of education. Now, Georgian education is very low to begin with, but Gwinnett is pretty high in terms of the level of education. There was a scandal that was uncovered about a couple of years ago, where it indicated that they were purposely not teaching the Black students the same way they were teaching the white students, right? And the Latino students were just kind of in between, right? So there's a systematic process that is going on in order to prevent Black people from being successful, to make sure that they're underexposed, making sure they're not getting the same levels of tutelage, so that we as a country can build from the same level field, same playing field. We're not going to, because the game is already stacked against us, if you understand what I'm saying now. So if we're talking about the development of students, then it should be the same across the board. But then when you're told, okay, we're not going to work with these Black students, we're not going to give them the same type of attention. We're not going to give them the same type of extra credit work. We're not going to go above and beyond to allow them to excel, or start teaching a methodology using different teaching techniques to make sure that all students understand and learn, because every student learns differently. Nobody learns the same. So these little stale teaching methods don't work for everybody. So instead of being creative and progressive and teaching in a manner which allows all students to grow and learn the way that they do, or the way that they're able to learn, you're not going to see progress in the way we want to see progress. If you're going to maintain that type of system, okay, fine. So again, the game is not set up to be the same for us. So do all lives matter? Yeah, of course it does. We know that. But again, there's nobody systematically being manipulated like our community. No one else is getting killed. I mean, you get a couple of Latinos here and there, so I'm not ruling out the Latino community at all. But it's going to be Black or brown. And every now and then you might get a few whites sprinkled in. But you don't hear Ma Jong-ping getting killed. You don't hear Tadeka Yamamoto getting killed, right? You don't hear about Sanjay Patel getting killed. You don't hear about Mohammed Hussein, who's a Pakistani dude who got killed. No. You don't hear about those things. You know, you don't even hear about Umbutu Umbake from Africa getting killed. You don't hear about that. But you hear James Jones, you hear Lorenzo Tate, you hear, you know, things like that. You might hear someone named Jamal or Bilal or Kamal or Rashid or Kareem or Kasim. There's those usual black names, Muslim and non. So that's what we're talking about. You even hear a Shanita or a Rebecca, or you might hear a Debbie, or you might hear this, because these are black women who are also getting killed. Because we had a black woman who just got killed. You know, the police here now have a law, a rule that they can raid your house without telling you they're coming in, without identifying themselves, and without identifying themselves, and without any kind of documentation that says they have the right to come in. So they can just bust into your house. Now, by law, I have the right to defend my home. If an intruder comes in, I have the right, if they're threatening me and my family, I have the right to shoot them. So if a police officer busts in my house and doesn't say police, I'm going to shoot him in his head if I can. You're not coming in my house armed, because as far as I'm concerned, you're going to hurt us. Well, that's what they did to one couple. They came in and shot dead one of the women. Now, the guy who lived in the house, the boyfriend, he actually had a firearm, and one of the police officers did get shot in the arm. He was subdued, but the girlfriend was killed. You see what I'm saying? And then they try to say, oh, he wouldn't, he didn't accept, the commands to get down and put his arms down. He didn't know who you were. And they weren't wearing police uniforms. They were wearing plain clothes. So you can't say that we went in and they knew we were police because we had badges or we had vests on that said police, and no one had a body cam on. Police are supposed to have body cams now in this country. They didn't have body cams on. So what does that really tell you? It sounds like a hit to me, but we're not going to go there. So the thing is, do all lives matter? Yes, but it's black people that are getting slaughtered. It's brown people getting slaughtered by police and others. That's the point. You never heard of anybody except for black people in this country getting hung from trees. Maybe a white person who liked black people, who supported black people, maybe every now and then, maybe a few of those sprinkled in, but the majority of the people getting hung from trees or putting nooses around their necks and getting dragged in the street behind cars, black people. Nobody else. So don't talk to me about all lives matter. Yeah, of course. But Black Lives Matter is specific to the situation that's at hand. It's a response to a situation that is at hand. And what's at hand are black people being unjustly and barbarically and cowardly killed by police and others. So having said that, should you join Black Lives Matter? If you want to. If you feel like you can be useful, yeah, why not? There's nothing wrong with having allies or acting in solidarity. No, Bismillah, please.
Tim.